Let's now continue building and actually finish building our hero section. And in this part 3 of building the hero, let's actually start by selecting a new typeface. So, for that, we will again use Google Fonts. And of course, we need to keep in mind the website personality that we chose. And so that's why I will first show you the Inter typeface, which, as I mentioned before, is kind of my new favorite. So let's just select a couple here, maybe 4, 5, and 700 here. And then we just copy these two lines here. So we already did this a couple of times before. And then remember, we need to paste it before our own style sheet. And now I will simply add Inter here first. And then as a fallback, if Inter doesn't work somehow, then sans serif will be used. So let's check that out. And now indeed, if you ask me, it does look a lot better than before. However, I'm not sure if this really fits our personality type so well. I mean, if it was just the startup personality, then I think Inter is actually a perfect font. But remember that we're also trying to mix some of the personality traits of the calm personality into our design. And so I think that we should use a little bit of a rounder typeface here. So Inter is a little bit harsh. So look just at this L here. It's like a complete square, like a complete rectangle, and there is nothing round about it. And so maybe this doesn't fit so nice with the overall message of the site and, of course, with the website personality. So we will not choose Inter, actually. So I will remove all here. And instead, let's go back. And now here, of course, you could now spend a lot of time searching for the right typeface for this design. All right. But I already did that work before, because otherwise we would lose a lot of time here. And the perfect typeface that I think fits really nicely into our design is called Rubik. So exactly this one here. Okay, and so let's now select a couple here. So 400 as always. Then I'm actually going with 4, 5, 6, and 700. Okay, and in case we wanted italic text, then we would actually also have to select these italic styles. But I think we will not need that. And so for now, I will just leave it like this. And then up here, we have our selected families. And then we can just copy this one again. Okay. Replace this one here. And then Rubik right here. And wait for it. And there we go. So this typeface, I think, is really, really beautiful, and it's really a nice mix between the startup personality, but making it a little bit more approachable and looking a bit more caring by being basically a bit more round. So comparing this L here with the one we had before, now it has these nicely rounded corners, and the same is of course true for all the other characters here as well. So really nice. Let's make this here actually the whole size. And yeah, so I think this is the perfect typeface. But as I said, usually when I build a project like this, I keep experimenting throughout the entire project with different typefaces, even at the very end, to see which one fits best. And so when we reach the end of this project, we might also do that again, because then it's actually a perfect time to see the entire layout changing the way it looks, simply by using some different typefaces. But for now, as a work in progress, I think this one here is great. Let's just make these buttons here a little bit bolder now that we have that 600 font weight. So you see that by default we have 400, and then 700 is like really bold, but to make it just a little bit less bold, we can use 600. So that's what I want to use here on the button. So font weight of 600, and that does look a lot nicer. Okay, but finally, let's now build that component that I mentioned in the very first part of building this hero, which is to have like some customer photos here, and then with some relevant data. And I thought of that because here in this description, we have this sentence here. So basically saying that OmniFood delivered 250,000 meals last year, which is kind of really impressive, right? And so I think this gets a bit lost here in this sentence. And so I thought that we could add a nice component here that I saw in that other inspiration. So in that other example. And yeah, I wanted to do the same thing here, basically based on that example. So let's do that. And if we take a look at our images, we actually do have, should be here in the customers. So we have a lot of photos here of customers that we can use. So 6 of them. So let's come back here into our hero text box and basically add that here after these buttons. So again, using a very generic div element, and then I will call it delivered meals. Then here inside of these meals, we need one box for the face images and then another box for the text, or maybe just some paragraph for that text. But anyway, let's call this one here the delivered faces. Okay, could be delivered images as well. Let's actually call it IMGs for images to be a bit more consistent. And then of course our image element source. So that's in IMG. And here we have yet another folder. So IMG /customers/customer once. Okay, and here let's add some very simple alt text. So this is just some customer photo. Okay. Now I'm copying this and pasting it a couple of times because we have 6 of them. So this looks a bit strange. So here I don't really agree with the prettier formatting. Yeah, that's a lot better. So here you see they are called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we just need to replace them here. And I will leave the alt text without any change. Okay, and then here I want that paragraph with the text. So let's get that actually. So it's this one here, right? So of course, actually it's also here. So let me just cut it from here and paste that here. And just to make it a little bit nicer and shorter, let's just say 250,000 meals delivered last year. Okay, let's check that out again. And indeed, that doesn't look so correct. And so we now need to build this small layout for this small component. So that's called delivered meals. And again, I will fix this CSS file here a little bit later because it's starting to get a bit confusing. But anyway, so we want the delivered meals to be side by side with that paragraph. So a good use case for using display flex. And this time I'm actually using flex and not grid because here I don't really care about the size of the columns. We will simply let the content determine the sizes. Okay. Then delivered well, not meals, but images. So here we also want these images to be side by side. So all the child elements here of delivered images, which are these images, should also become flex elements. And so now let's format these images. But here I didn't give them any class. And well, I usually don't do that when it goes so many levels deep. So here I would now have to call them like delivered img, but that's a bit too much trouble, maybe. So I'm just going to select the img using this descendant selector. So let's give them some height. So based, of course, again here on our rules. So maybe 64 pixels. And if that is too big, we go one step down to 48. So 64, which means 6.4 rem. And well, usually we do not need to specify a width because it will automatically get adjusted. But there is some bug in the Safari browser when the images are flex items. And so we need to do that here as well. So we simply set the width to the exact same thing to make them squared. Okay, and then we also want to make them round. And since they are squared, we can set the border radius to 50%. Remember that? And so let's check it out, maybe, or actually let's first also style this paragraph here, which I didn't actually give a class yet. So that's delivered text, let's say. Okay. So to give it some visual hierarchy here, let's make it smaller than the paragraph text that we had before, that summary. So where is that? It's right here. So it's at 2 rem. And so let's go one step down, which is 1.8 rem. So 18 pixels. So here we are using all of these ideas about visual hierarchy with text and with the entire layout in general as well. And let's give it some font weight, maybe of 600 to make it stand out then a bit more from the rest. Okay, so that's starting to look like something, but these images are way too big for now. So let's fix that. And we also need some spacing here, so some vertical spacing between this component and this button. So let's start with that, actually. And well, we cannot really add any spacing simply to the buttons here, right? So again, that would then be against the idea that these buttons should be standalone components. So, which is also the reason why here I added this margin using this helper class, right? So I could create a margin bottom or something class like that, but then I would have to add it to both these buttons. And I think that's not really worth it, because what we can do instead is to simply add some margin to the top of this element here. So delivered meals. So margin top in this case. And here let's use a lot. So maybe 80 pixels. So not quite the 96. That would be a bit too much, but let's try 8 rem here. Okay. And then, make the images smaller. So stepping down from 64, the next one is 48 pixels. So 4.8 rem. Okay. And so that is a lot better already. Great. Now what we need to fix is to add some spacing here and align these vertically. And then one very nice thing that we can do here is to kind of overlap these images here on top of each other. So that's something that we see quite often when we have a situation like this, because, well, like this, it looks a bit strange. So we can just overlap them. And I'm sure you have seen this also in practice before. So starting with the spacing and vertical aligning, that is right here on this delivered meals flex container. And so here we need to then add align items, remember, to center everything vertically. And then to add some spacing, we use our gap property. And let's use 16 pixels, so 1.6 rem. Okay, so that fixes that first part. And now remember, the second thing that we wanted to do is to put these images on top of each other. So basically we want to decrease the spacing between them. And so we might think that since we are using a flex container here, so this delivered images which contains the images is also a flex container. And so we might think that here we could set the gap property to a negative value. However, for some reason that doesn't really work. And so here we actually need to work on the individual images themselves. So here we can add a margin to the right with a negative value. And so let's again use, for consistency, 1.6 rem, but then negatively. And so that will basically pull each of the images 16 pixels more to the left. All right. Yeah, so exactly like this. Now, for some reason, the margin, so this gap here is not really being applied. Let's see what's happening there. And so this is where, once again, the DevTools come in very handy. Just make this a bit bigger so you can actually see. So the problem here is that the flex container basically ends right here. And the reason for that is that all the images have this negative margin. Well, it's not really visible here, but we need to basically remove the negative margin from this last one here. That should then fix it. So then this end of the flex container should be back here, and then we should be able to see that margin that is now on top of the image. So let's select the last one. And for that, fortunately, we have our very handy last child pseudo class. And so here we set the margin back to 0. So we could have written margin right as well, but here basically we're setting all the margins back to 0. Okay, and now that is fixed indeed. Right. Now just one more thing, or actually two more things. So first I want to make this one here a bit more visible. And so I'm also giving it this orange color here. And then another thing that we do many times when we overlap images like this is to then add a nice small border to each of them to create basically some visible space between them. And you will see what I mean in a second here once I do that. So basically what I just said is to add a border, let's say 3 pixel solid, with the exact same background color as the color that is around the images. So if that was white, we would use white, but in this case that is this background color right here. Actually, it is this color, but it's not coming from here. I mean, it is here from this section hero, right? So that's right here. Right. So this looks a bit nicer. It's just a small detail, you might think, in the small touch, but it makes it immediately look a bit more designed. So as if someone thought a little bit more about this component. And so that is always a good thing to do. Now, finally, as I said, I want to make this text here also orange in order to make it stand out a bit more. So let's wrap it in a span element, which is like a generic text element. So a bit like a div element, but for inline elements. So let's select that again with a descendant selector instead of adding just another class there. So our brand color is this one here, I think. Let's just make sure. Yeah, it's always the one that ends in 22. And since we're already here, let's make it even a little bit bolder. So going all the way to 700. Okay, nice. Let's just make sure that the contrast ratio is actually good here. Because here we are actually using this orange color on top of another orange color. Even though this one here is very light, but I'm actually not sure if it has the correct color contrast ratio. So to check this, we go to this Coolors or something website, which one more time it is on my resources page. Then we click away all this stuff. Then here on more, we come to contrast checker. Then we paste our text color here. Well, I'm not sure what that is. It was this text that I copied before. So indeed I want this. And the background color is this one here. And so you see it is very poor. So this red background here means that we are in trouble. So let's use the next dark that we have. So this one here. Let's copy this. Let's just make sure it's here already. Actually, it's not. So just again to make sure we have everything in one place. Let's put that here. And it is still poor here, but down here it just became yellow, which is for a large text. But if we take a look here, then we see that level AA requires 3.1 for large text, so at least 18 pixels, or bold text. And in our case, the text is actually very bold, and so I think we're good to go with that color here. So let's replace that, and there we go. So you think that this might be a very minor thing to worry about, but as I said, I believe, and the whole web developer community believes as well, that we should really strive to make our websites as accessible as possible. And so I think it's not too much to worry about a small detail like this. Okay, and with this, we actually finished building this hero section. So I hope that you like this result. I think it looks really, really beautiful. So great result here. We have some nice visual hierarchy where this text here is closer a little bit to this one because they belong kind of together. Then we have a bit more space between the buttons and then a lot more space. Well, actually not that much space, but still there's a lot more space here than here. And so again, we create a nice visual hierarchy right there. Let me just remember how much we used here. It looks like it's not that much. It was 8 RAM, while here we have 4.8 RAM. But then because of the line height, it is actually a bit more, as we can see here in this blue box that is around it. But still, I think this looks good. Also the spacing between these columns and around everything here looks quite decent. And so yeah, I think this is done for now. And so in the next lecture, we will then also build the header here. So putting the logo here and also start working a bit on the navigation. So that is yet another exciting step to really polish off and finish this whole introduction to our website. And so hopefully I see you there very soon.